Hello everyone, I am the narrator, and I'm here to guide you through a journey into the unknown today. I know many of you use this video to unwind and fall asleep, so before we dive in, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, I'd love to know, where are you from, and what time are you watching this? Now, get comfortable, let your mind wander, and allow yourself to relax. This is going to be an adventure like no other. Let's begin. Asterisk. I jolted awake to the sound of my phone alarm blaring next to my head. Fumbling in the darkness, I managed to silence it and squinted at the screen. The brightness made me wee-see as my eyes adjusted. 8:47 in the morning. That couldn't be right. My bedroom was pitch black, the kind of darkness that belongs to the middle of the night. I reached for the lamp on my nightstand and flicked it on, blinking as the sudden light illuminated my cluttered room. Something felt off. "Andrea," I called out, momentarily. Forgetting she hadn't stayed over last night. We'd talked on the phone before bed, making plans for dinner later this week. The silence that answered made my apartment feel emptier than usual. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and shuffled to the window, pulling back the curtains, expecting to see morning light filtering through the Chicago skyline. Instead, I was met with darkness. Complete, absolute darkness. The streetlights were still on, casting pools of yellow light on the sidewalks below. A few cars moved along the street, headlights cutting through the blackness. "What the hell?" I muttered, pressing my face against the glass. My brain cycled through logical explanations. Maybe my phone was wrong. Maybe the power had gone out and reset my alarm clock. But no, the lamp worked fine, and my phone showed the correct date. Maybe a massive storm system had moved in overnight. Chicago weather was unpredictable, especially in fall. I grabbed my phone again and pulled up the weather app. Current conditions, 62.com winds, no precipitation. Nothing that explained why the sky looked like midnight at almost 9 in the morning. My stomach tightened. I tried to calm the anxious thoughts, starting to bubble up by focusing on practical matters. I needed to call work. Whatever was happening, I wouldn't be coming in today. "Hey, Janet," I said, when my boss's administrative assistant answered. "It's David Patterson. I'm not feeling well today. Think I'm coming down with something. I'll be working from home." "Oh, David, are you seeing this outside?" "It's the strangest thing," Janet replied, her voice higher than normal. "Everyone's talking about it. Pete said he almost drove off the road because he thought his clock was wrong and he was still driving in the middle of the night." "Yeah, it's weird," I said, not knowing how else to describe it. "Any idea what's causing it?" "None. The news is just as confused as we are. Anyway, feel better. Keep us posted if you figure out what's happening before we do." After hanging up, I made coffee, going through the motions of my morning routine, while trying to ignore the darkness outside my windows. The familiar smell of brewing coffee grounded me as I turned on the TV, flipping to the local news. Unprecedented weather phenomenon affecting the entire Chicago area, a female anchor was saying, her expression a mixture of confusion and forced calm. "We go now to Tom Wilson, our meteorologist. Tom, can you explain what we're seeing, or rather not seeing this morning?" The camera cut to a middle-aged man standing in front of a weather map that showed absolutely nothing unusual. "Frankly, Diane, we're all baffled here," Tom said, gesturing to the map. "There's no cloud cover that would explain this level of darkness. No storm system, no fog, nothing on our radar at all. By all meteorological indications, we should be seeing a clear sunrise. But as you can see from our skyline cameras, the screen split to show a live feed of downtown Chicago. Street lights and building lights twinkling in what looked like the middle of the night. The sun simply hasn't risen. We're checking with weather services across the region to see if this is localized to Chicago, or if other areas are experiencing the same phenomenon." I poured my coffee with unsteady hands and took a sip, burning my tongue. Setting the mug down harder than intended, I splashed hot coffee onto my hand and swore under my breath. I needed to talk to Andrea. She always kept me grounded when my anxiety started spiraling. I tapped her contact and listened to the phone ring, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hey, this is Andrea. Leave a message and I'll call you back." "Andrea, it's me. Are you seeing this? The whole city's dark, even though it's morning. Call me when you get this, okay? I just want to make sure you're all right." I paused. "Love you." I ended the call and stared at my phone screen. Andrea worked downtown at a marketing firm. She was probably already at her desk, dealing with the same confusion as everyone else. Her phone might be dead or on silent. There were plenty of normal reasons why she wasn't answering. Still, I tried texting her. "Morning. World's gone weird. You okay?" No immediate response. I finished my coffee and made another cup, then started pacing around my apartment. The news had moved on to interviewing confused citizens on the street, all expressing variations of, "I've never seen anything like this," and "Is this the apocalypse?" I checked social media, finding my feeds flooded with photos of the dark sky, speculation ranging from scientific theories about atmospheric anomalies to religious proclamations about the end times. A Chicago darkness and EU where's the sun were trending. By 10:30, I'd checked every weather and news site I could think of. None had explanations, only confirmations that the phenomenon wasn't just in Chicago. Reports were coming in from across the Midwest, then the East Coast, then everywhere. The darkness was spreading, or maybe it had happened everywhere simultaneously, and reports were just catching up. I tried Andrea again, still voicemail. At 11:15, the news anchor's professional demeanor had noticeably slipped. "We're receiving reports that this darkness is not limited to the United States," she said, touching her earpiece. "We have confirmation from our international affiliates that Europe, Asia, and Australia are all experiencing the same phenomenon. The sun has not risen anywhere on Earth." I felt a cold wave wash over me. This wasn't a storm. This wasn't a local weather anomaly. This was something else entirely, something impossible. I turned away from the TV and looked out my window again. Despite the revelation that the entire world was experiencing an unprecedented, astronomical event, people on the street below seemed to be going about their business. A woman walked her dog. A delivery guy balanced packages. Two people stood at the bus stop. It was surreal watching them move through what looked like night, but was actually, according to every clock, the middle of the day. The temperature hadn't dropped. There was no wind howling, no rain or snow falling, just darkness where there should be light. I checked the thermometer on my weather app again. Still 62. Whatever was happening wasn't affecting temperature, only light. My scientific mind struggled to come up with explanations. Solar eclipse. No, that would have been predicted in only last minutes. Some kind of massive dust cloud or volcanic eruption blocking the sun, but there had been no reports of volcanic activity, and the sky didn't look hazy, just dark with stars, visible like it was truly night. By noon, I'd bitten my nails down to the quick. A nervous habit, I thought, I'd broken years ago. The news had grown increasingly frantic, with experts from NASA and various observatories being interviewed, all looking equally bewildered. Words like unprecedented and inexplicable were repeated so often they started to lose meaning. I jumped at a sudden knock on my door. For a moment, I just stared at it, as if I could see through the wood to whoever was on the other side. The knock came again, more insistent. "David, you in there?" "It's Sam from down the hall." I recognized the voice of my neighbor from apartment 4C. We weren't close, but we made small talk when we crossed paths at the mailboxes or in the elevator. I unlocked the door and opened it to find Sam standing there in what looked like hastily thrown on clothes, his dark hair uncut. "Hey," I said, stepping back to let him in. "You're seeing this, too, right? I'm not hallucinating." Sam let out a humorless laugh. Wish I could tell you that you were, but no, the whole world's gone crazy. He ran a hand through his hair. Do you know what's happening? I mean, you work with computers, right? You're a smart guy. I'm a software developer, not an astronomer, I said, closing the door behind him. The news doesn't know anything. Nobody seems to know anything. Sam walked to my window and looked out. I tried driving to my sister's place in Evanston, but the traffic is insane. People are panicking even though everything else seems normal. It's just dark. Have you heard from anyone outside Chicago? I asked, joining him at the window. My cousin in California texted me. Same thing there. It's like the sun just decided not to show up today. Everywhere. Sam turned to me, and I could see real fear in his eyes. What does that even mean? How is that possible? I shook my head, having no answer to give him. Hello everyone, I am the narrator, and I'm here to guide you through a journey into the unknown today. I know many of you use this video to unwind and fall asleep, so before we dive in, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, I'd love to know, where are you from, and what time are you watching this? Now, get comfortable, let your mind wander, and allow yourself to relax. This is going to be an adventure like no other. Let's begin. Asterisk, asterisk, I jolted awake to the sound of my phone alarm blaring next to my head. Fumbling in the darkness, I managed to silence it and squinted at the screen. The brightness made me wee-see as my eyes adjusted. 8:47 in the morning. That couldn't be right. My bedroom was pitch black, the kind of darkness that belongs to the middle of the night. I reached for the lamp on my nightstand and flicked it on, blinking as the sudden light illuminated my cluttered room. Something felt off. Andrea, I called out, momentarily, forgetting she hadn't stayed over last night. We'd talked on the phone before bed, making plans for dinner later this week. The silence that answered made my apartment feel emptier than usual. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and shuffled to the window, pulling back the curtains, expecting to see morning light filtering through the Chicago skyline. Instead, I was met with darkness. Complete, absolute darkness. The streetlights were still on, casting pools of yellow light on the sidewalks below. A few cars moved along the street, headlights cutting through the blackness. What the hell? I muttered, pressing my face against the glass. My brain cycled through logical explanations. Maybe my phone was wrong. Maybe the power had gone out and reset my alarm clock. But no, the lamp worked fine and my phone showed the correct date. Maybe a massive storm system had moved in overnight. Chicago weather was unpredictable, especially in fall. I grabbed my phone again and pulled up the weather app. Current conditions, 62.com winds, no precipitation. Nothing that explained why the sky looked like midnight at almost 9 in the morning. My stomach tightened. I tried to calm the anxious thoughts starting to bubble up by focusing on practical matters. I needed to call work. Whatever was happening, I wouldn't be coming in today. Hey, Janet, I said when my boss's administrative assistant answered. It's David Patterson. I'm not feeling well today. Think I'm coming down with something. I'll be working from home. Oh, David, are you seeing this outside? It's the strangest thing, Janet replied, her voice higher than normal. Everyone's talking about it, Pete said. He almost drove off the road because he thought his clock was wrong and he was still driving in the middle of the night. Yeah, it's weird, I said, not knowing how else to describe it. Any idea what's causing it? None. The news is just as confused as we are. Anyway, feel better. Keep us posted if you figure out what's happening before we do. After hanging up, I made coffee, going through the motions of my morning routine while trying to ignore the darkness outside my windows. The familiar smell of brewing coffee grounded me as I turned on the TV. Flipping to the local news, unprecedented weather phenomenon affecting the entire Chicago area, a female anchor was saying, her expression a mixture of confusion and forced calm. We go now to Tom Wilson, our meteorologist. Tom, can you explain what we're seeing, or rather not seeing this morning? The camera cut to a middle-aged man standing in front of a weather map that showed absolutely nothing unusual. Frankly, Diane, we're all baffled here, Tom said, gesturing to the map. There's no cloud cover that would explain this level of darkness. No storm system, no fog, nothing on our radar at all. By all meteorological indications, we should be seeing a clear sunrise. But as you can see from our skyline cameras, the screen split to show a live feed of downtown Chicago. Streetlights and building lights twinkling in what looked like the middle of the night. The sun simply hasn't risen. We're checking with weather services across the region to see if this is localized to Chicago, or if other areas are experiencing the same phenomenon. I poured my coffee with unsteady hands and took a sip, burning my tongue, setting the mug down harder than intended. I splashed hot coffee onto my hand and swore under my breath. I needed to talk to Andrea. She always kept me grounded when my anxiety started spiraling. I tapped her contact and listened to the phone ring, but it went straight to voicemail. Hey, this is Andrea. Leave a message, and I'll call you back. Andrea, it's me. Are you seeing this? The whole city's dark, even though it's morning. Call me when you get this. Okay. I just want to make sure you're all right. I paused. Love you. I ended the call and stared at my phone screen. Andrea worked downtown at a marketing firm. She was probably already at her desk, dealing with the same confusion as everyone else. Her phone might be dead or on silent. There were plenty of normal reasons why she wasn't answering. Still, I tried texting her. Morning. World's gone weird. You okay? No immediate response. I finished my coffee and made another cup, then started pacing around my apartment. The news had moved on to interviewing confused citizens on the street, all expressing variations of, "I've never seen anything like this," and "Is this the apocalypse?" I checked social media, finding my feeds flooded with photos of the dark sky. Speculation, ranging from scientific theories about atmospheric anomalies to religious proclamations about the end times, a Chicago darkness, and EU where's the sun were trending. By 10:30, I'd checked every weather and news site I could think of. None had explanations, only confirmations that the phenomenon wasn't just in Chicago. Reports were coming in from across the Midwest, then the East Coast, then everywhere. The darkness was spreading, or maybe it had happened everywhere simultaneously, and reports were just catching up. I tried Andrea again, still voicemail. At 11:15, the news anchor's professional demeanor had noticeably slipped. "We're receiving reports that this darkness is not limited to the United States," she said, touching her earpiece. "We have confirmation from our international affiliates that Europe, Asia, and Australia are all experiencing the same phenomenon. The sun has not risen anywhere on Earth." I felt a cold wave wash over me. This wasn't a storm. This wasn't a local weather anomaly. This was something else entirely. Something impossible. I turned away from the TV and looked out my window again. Despite the revelation that the entire world was experiencing an unprecedented, astronomical event, people on the street below seemed to be going about their business. A woman walked her dog. A delivery guy balanced packages. 2 people stood at the bus stop. It was surreal watching them move through what looked like night, but was actually, according to every clock, the middle of the day. The temperature hadn't dropped. There was no wind howling, no rain or snow falling, just darkness where there should be light. I checked the thermometer on my weather app again. Still 62. Whatever was happening wasn't affecting temperature, only light. My scientific mind struggled to come up with explanations. Solar eclipse. No, that would have been predicted in only last minutes. Some kind of massive dust cloud or volcanic eruption blocking the sun. But there had been no reports of volcanic activity, and the sky didn't look hazy. Just dark with stars visible like it was truly night. By noon, I'd bitten my nails down to the quick. A nervous habit, I thought, I'd broken years ago. The news had grown increasingly frantic with experts from NASA and various observatories being interviewed, all looking equally bewildered. Words like unprecedented and inexplicable were repeated so often they started to lose meaning. I jumped at a sudden knock on my door. For a moment, I just stared at it, as if I could see through the wood to whoever was on the other side. The knock came again, more insistent. "David, you in there?" "It's Sam from down the hall." I recognized the voice of my neighbor from apartment 4C. We weren't close, but we made small talk when we crossed paths at the mailboxes or in the elevator. I unlocked the door and opened it to find Sam standing there in what looked like hastily thrown on clothes. His dark hair "Hey," I said, stepping back to let him in. "You seeing this, too, right? I'm not hallucinating." Sam let out a humorless laugh. "Wish I could tell you that you were, but no, the whole world's gone crazy." He ran a hand through his hair. "Do you know what's happening? I mean, you work with computers, right? You're a smart guy." "I'm a software developer, not an astronomer," I said, closing the door behind him. "The news doesn't know anything. Nobody seems to know anything." Sam walked to my window and looked out. "I tried driving to my sister's place in Evanston, but the traffic is insane. People are panicking even though everything else seems normal. It's just dark." "Have you heard from anyone outside Chicago?" I asked, joining him at the window. "My cousin in California texted me. Same thing there. It's like the sun just decided not to show up today. Everywhere." Sam turned to me, and I could see real fear in his eyes. "What does that even mean? How is that possible?" I shook my head, having no answer to give him. "Help each other. We don't know what's happening, but we're all in this together." She stood up and walked off camera, leaving an empty desk on screen for several seconds before someone cut to the same emergency broadcast message. I sat in the growing silence of my apartment, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. This wasn't just a weird weather event or temporary phenomenon. Something fundamental had changed in the world, and no one knew what it was or how to fix it. My phone buzzed with an emergency alert. "Shelter in place. Conserve resources. Await further instructions." I got up and went to the kitchen, counting my food supplies more carefully this time. 2 cans of soup, half a jar of peanut butter, 4 packets of ramen, a box of pasta, some sauce. My water was still running, so I filled every container I could find. Pots, water bottles, the picture from my fridge. Through it all, I kept glancing at my phone, hoping to see Andrea's name on the screen. Each time, I was disappointed. I felt a little piece of hope break off inside me. I wondered where she was right now. Was she still at work, stuck on a bus trying to get home? Was she safe? The thought of her alone in this chaos made my chest ache. I tried her number again. Voicemail. I tried Andrea's number one more time, listening to the now familiar voicemail greeting with growing dread. The quiet of my apartment pressed in on me. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. A sharp knock at my door made me jump. I froze, phone still in hand. The knock came again, more urgent this time. "David, are you there?" "It's me," Andrea's voice. I nearly tripped over myself, rushing to the door, fumbling with the lock before yanking it open. She stood in my doorway, her dark hair windblown, face pale, a backpack slung over one shoulder. Her hands were visibly shaking. "Thank God," I said, pulling her inside and wrapping my arms around her. She hugged me back hard, her body trembling slightly against mine. I could feel her heart racing. For a long moment, we just stood there holding each other in my entryway, neither of us speaking. "I tried calling you so many times," I finally said, pulling back to look at her. "What happened? Are you okay?" Andrea dropped her backpack on the floor and pushed her hair back from her face. "My phone died hours ago. The office lost power around noon, and I couldn't charge it. She moved past me into the living room, glancing at the TV, still showing the emergency broadcast screen. I tried using my boss's phone to call you, but the lines were jammed. Nothing was going through. How did you get here? The news said downtown was being evacuated. She sank onto my couch, exhaustion written across her face. I walked 12 blocks. The buses stopped running, and the L shut down completely. Some kind of power issue. She looked up at me. It's total chaos out there, David. I sat beside her, taking her cold hands in mine. Up close, I could see the fear she was trying to hide behind her composed expression. Tell me what you saw, I said quietly. Andrea took a deep breath. At first, it was just confusion. Everyone thinking it was some weird weather thing that would pass. But then the power started going out in sections of downtown. People panicked. She paused, her eyes distant. I saw a group of guys break into a convenience store, just smashed the window and started grabbing stuff. Nobody stopped them. Are you hurt? I asked, scanning her for injuries. She shook her head. No. I stuck to main streets, kept moving. Most people were just trying to get home like me. Her voice cracked slightly. There was a car accident on Michigan Avenue. Nobody came to help. No ambulance, no police. People just walked around it. I got up and went to the kitchen, returning with a glass of water, which she took gratefully. It's going to be okay, she said after taking a sip, trying to smile. We'll figure this out. But I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, see it in the way her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. She was trying to be strong, but she was just as scared as I was. On the TV, the emergency broadcast message continued its monotonous loop. Remain in your homes. Conserve resources. Await further instructions. Have you heard anything new? Andrea asked, nodding toward the screen. Most stations went off air a couple hours ago. This one's been showing the same message for the past hour. I picked up the remote and changed channels, finding one local station still broadcasting. A tired-looking reporter was speaking from what looked like someone's living room rather than a studio. Continuing power outages across the city. Officials are asking residents to minimize electricity usage. If you live in an area with functioning utilities, please fill bathtubs and available containers with water in case of service interruptions. Andrea watched silently, her fingers tightening around the glass in her hand. I need to check on my parents, she said suddenly. I turned to her. What? My parents? They live alone, David. They don't have anyone else to help them. Her voice grew more urgent. My dad has a heart condition. What if his medication runs out? What if they can't get food, or their power goes out? Andrea, you just got here. You saw how bad it is out there. That's exactly why I need to go. She set the glass down and turned to face me. They're all alone in that house. You know my mom can barely use a cell phone in normal times. They need me. Fear crawled up my spine. It's not safe. You said yourself, it's chaos out there. They're my parents, she said simply, as if that explained everything. And in a way, it did. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think rationally. Andrea's parents lived on the south side, maybe 5 miles from my apartment. In normal times, it would be a short drive or bus ride. But now, let me come with you, I said. She shook her head. Someone should stay here in case things get better. In case they give instructions on the emergency broadcast or something. Her eyes met mine, determined. I'll be quick. Just check on them. Make sure they have what they need and come back. What if you can't get back? The question hung between us, the thing we were both thinking but didn't want to say out loud. Andrea reached for my hand. I will. I promise. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both lost in our own thoughts. I knew I couldn't stop her from going. Her mind was made up. All I could do was help her be as prepared as possible. We should pack some supplies for you to take, I said finally. Andrea nodded, relief crossing her face at my acceptance of her decision. We moved through the apartment gathering items. a flashlight with fresh batteries, a water bottle, some granola bars, a small first aid kit. One added a few cans of soup, and the rest of my peanut butter, thinking of her parents. "Take this, too," I said, handing her my pocket knife. She took it without comment and slipped it into her jacket pocket from her backpack. She pulled out a small canister of pepper spray. "Already covered the self-defense angle," she said with a weak smile. "Keep your phone off to save battery," I advised, trying to think of anything else that might help. "Only turn it on if you need to call or text me. What about you? Will you be okay here alone?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The thought of her leaving, of being separated again, made my chest tight. We packed everything into her backpack, which now bulged with supplies. I added a blanket, rolling it tightly and securing it with rubber bands. "It's getting late," I said, looking at my watch. 6 o'clock though. With the darkness outside, time felt meaningless. "Maybe you should wait until morning." "What's morning anymore?" Andrea asked softly, zipping up the backpack. "It's just going to be more of this, and the longer I wait, the more worried I'll be about them." I couldn't argue with that logic. We both stood awkwardly for a moment, neither wanting to say goodbye. Andrea broke the silence. "I'll be back before you know it. We'll get through this." She touched my face gently. "We always figure things out, right? Right?" I said, trying to believe it. She kissed me then, her lips warm against mine, her arms wrapping around my neck. I held her close, memorizing the feel of her not wanting to let go. "I love you," she whispered against my ear. "I love you, too. Please be careful." She pulled away, shouldering the backpack. "I will lock the door behind me." I walked her to the door, watching as she checked the flashlight one more time, its beam cutting through the dim hallway. She gave me one last smile, trying to look confident. "See you soon," she said, and then she was gone, her footsteps fading down the hallway. I closed the door and locked it as promised, then went straight to the window. A minute later, I spotted her emerging from the building below, flashlight beams swinging as she walked purposefully down the street. I watched until she turned the corner, her light becoming smaller and smaller before finally disappearing completely, swallowed by the darkness. The silence in the apartment pressed down on me once she was gone. I stood at the window for a long time, staring at the point where I'd last seen her light, as if by watching I could somehow ensure her safe return. Eventually, I moved away from the window and tried to distract myself. I picked up a book, but couldn't focus on the words. I put on music, but it felt wrong somehow, too normal for the situation. I kept checking my phone for texts from Andrea, though I knew she would keep hers off to save battery, as we'd discussed. Still, I couldn't help looking every few minutes just in case. At 8 o'clock, I turned back to the TV. Flipping through channels, all but one showed the emergency broadcast message. Now, the last functioning station showed a single reporter sitting at a desk, reading from a sheet of paper by lamplight. "If you're still receiving this broadcast, please continue to shelter in place. Conserve food, water, and electricity. Help neighbors if you safely can. We don't know when regular broadcasting will." The screen suddenly went black, then flickered back to the emergency broadcast message. The last station had gone silent. I turned off the TV and sat in the dark, listening to the distant sirens and occasional shouts from the street below, waiting for Andrea to return from the endless night outside. I jerked awake on the couch, momentarily confused by the darkness. My phone said it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I must have dozed off, waiting for Andrea to return. The TV still flickered with the silent emergency broadcast message, casting blue shadows across my living room. My neck ached from the awkward position I'd fallen asleep in. I rubbed it as I checked my phone again. No messages, no missed calls, nothing from Andrea. I went to the window, pulling back the curtain to look at the street below. The streetlights cast pools of yellow light on the empty sidewalks. Empty except I froze. my hand tightening on the curtain. People were standing on the street, not walking, not moving at all, just standing there in the darkness. One figure stood directly across from my building, positioned beneath the street light. Even from 4 floors up, I recognized her, Margaret Calloway, my elderly neighbor from the 2nd floor. She was wearing what looked like a nightgown, her thin white hair unmistakable even in the dim light. Her face was tilted upward, aimed directly at the building, and she was smiling. Not a normal smile. Her lips were pulled too wide, stretched across her face in a way that looked painful. I leaned closer to the glass, squinting to make sure I wasn't imagining things. She didn't move, not even slightly. Her arms hung at her sides, the nightgown fluttering slightly in the breeze. But Margaret herself was completely still. I scanned the rest of the street. There were others, at least 5 more figures standing at various points along the block. A man in a business suit near the corner, a woman by a parked car, 2 people near the alley entrance, all of them motionless, all of them with that same stretched smile. None of them looked up at passing cars or responded to the occasional emergency vehicle that sped by with sirens, wailing. They just stood there, fixed in place like mannequins. Someone had positioned throughout the neighborhood. I checked the time again. 2:17. I decided to watch Margaret to see if she moved at all. Minutes ticked by. 5, 10, 15. She remained completely stationary, that strange smile fixed on her face, her eyes unblinking as far as I could tell. "Margaret," I called out, opening the window a crack. My voice sounded small and ineffectual against the vastness of the darkness. "Margaret, are you okay?" No response, not even a twitch to indicate she'd heard me. I closed the window and backed away, suddenly afraid she might look directly at me if I called out again. There was something deeply wrong about the way she was standing there, about the way all of them were standing. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The call wouldn't connect. I tried 3 more times with the same result. Next, I tried Andrea's number again, my fingers clumsy with growing dread. "You've reached Andrea Martinez. I can't take your call right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." The normality of her voicemail greeting made my chest hurt. I hung up without leaving another message. What was there to say that I hadn't already said? I returned to the window, drawn back despite my unease. Margaret hadn't moved an inch. Neither had any of the others. I found myself counting them. 7 total now. Had there been more before? I couldn't remember. For the next few hours, I alternated between pacing my apartment, trying Andrea's number, and returning to the window to check on the motionless figures outside. They never moved, never blinked, never acknowledged the occasional car that drove past, or the distant sound of breaking glass somewhere in the neighborhood. Around 5 in the morning, I needed to use the bathroom. I hesitated, oddly reluctant to look away from the window, as if something might happen the moment I turned my back. But the pressure in my bladder won out. When I returned less than 2 minutes later, I immediately knew something had changed. Margaret was no longer across the street. She was now directly in front of my building, standing beneath the streetlight closest to the entrance. Her head was still tilted back, her gaze still directed upward. That smile still stretched across her face. She had moved while I wasn't watching. My heart hammered in my chest as I scanned the street. The other figures had also changed positions. Not dramatically, but noticeably. They were all slightly closer to my building than before, all facing it, all wearing those same fixed smiles. I backed away from the window, bumping into the coffee table and nearly falling. Cold sweat broke out across my forehead. They had moved without walking, or they had moved so quickly and silently that no one had noticed. Either option was impossible. Either option was terrifying. I returned to the window one more time, staying back far enough that I couldn't be seen from below. There were more of them now, 9 at least, all facing my building, all smiling, and all of them, somehow, I knew with absolute certainty, were watching me. I pulled the curtains closed with shaking hands, feeling their invisible gazes penetrate the fabric, the glass, the very walls of my apartment. I sank onto the couch, grabbing my phone like a lifeline, trying Andrea's number again, though I knew she wouldn't answer. The darkness pressed against my windows, and somewhere beyond it, Margaret Calloway and the others stood motionless, waiting for something I couldn't understand. Their eyes turned toward my home, their smiles stretched too wide across their still, silent faces. The night dragged on without mercy. I sat on my couch in the darkness, phone clutched in my hand, checking for messages from Andrea every few minutes, though I knew none would come. By 6 o'clock in the morning, exhaustion went out. I dozed fitfully, waking with a start at every distant siren or shout from the streets. Each time I checked my phone, each time nothing, at what my phone said was 8 o'clock in the morning. Though the darkness outside remained as deep as midnight, I finally gave up on sleep. My apartment felt too quiet, too empty. Andrea should have been back by now. She should have at least called. I made myself a cup of coffee, going through the motions mechanically, my thoughts circling back to Andrea with every breath. Had she made it to her parents? Was she safe? Was she trying to call me on a dead phone? The possibilities crowded my mind, each one worse than the last. The coffee tasted bitter and wrong. I poured it down the sink after 2 sips. I forced myself to approach the window again. My hand trembled slightly as I parted the curtains a few inches, just enough to peer outside. The street below had changed. What had been 9 figures last night had grown to at least a dozen now. Margaret remained closest to my building, still in her nightgown, her white hair ghostly in the streetlight. But others had joined her. A man in a business suit, a teenage girl with a backpack, an elderly man with a cane that he wasn't using, just holding limply at his side. All of them standing perfectly still. All of them with their faces turned up toward my building. All of them smiling. I moved to the next window, the one in my kitchen that looked out onto the side street. Within seconds, I watched as the figures below slowly turned their heads, redirecting their gaze to my new position. Their bodies remained facing forward, but their heads swiveled with mechanical precision to track my movement. "What the hell?" I whispered, backing away from the window. I went to my bedroom, to the window that faced the back of the building. I waited a full minute before looking out. When I did, I saw 4 of the figures had repositioned themselves to see this side of the building as soon as I appeared. Their heads turned upward toward my window. They were following me, tracking my movements through my apartment. I returned to the living room window, my heart hammering. The original figures had returned their focus to this window as soon as I appeared. On a sudden impulse, I raised my hand and waved. No response. Not a single one waved back or showed any change in expression. But their smiles, did they look wider now? The corners of their mouths stretched just a bit further across their faces. I dropped the curtain and backed away, stomach churning. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen, reminding me I should eat something. I opened it and stared blankly at the contents. Nothing appealed to me. The thought of food made my stomach twist. I grabbed an apple more out of obligation than hunger and took a single bite before setting it down on the counter. Forgotten, I tried. Andrea's number again. Voicemail as expected. Then I tried Sam's number, wondering if my neighbor had seen what was happening outside. No answer there either. The silence in my apartment pressed against my ears. I turned on the TV for noise, but the emergency broadcast was still the only thing showing on every channel. I shut it off again, preferring the silence to the monotonous droning of instructions that no longer seemed to apply to whatever was happening. By what my phone told me was noon, I'd worn a path in my carpet from pacing. My worry for Andrea had transformed into something harder and sharper than anxiety. It was fear now, raw and unfiltered. If she'd made it to her parents, she would have found a way to contact me. The only explanation for her silence was that something had happened to her. I returned to the window, drawn there by a need to know what was happening outside, even as I dreaded what I might see. The number of figures had grown again. I counted 17 now, spread out along the street, all standing perfectly still, all smiling up at the building. As I watched a young man walk down the sidewalk, his head down, hands in his pockets. He moved quickly, purpose in his stride, one of those still functioning people trying to get somewhere in this broken world. He didn't seem to notice the smiling figures until he was almost upon them. The young man slowed, then stopped, looking at Margaret with visible confusion. His mouth moved. He was speaking to her. Margaret didn't respond, didn't move, didn't blink, just kept smiling, that terrible smile, her eyes fixed on my window. The young man waved a hand in front of Margaret's face. No response. He turned, appearing to notice the others for the first time, his body language showing growing alarm. He took a step back, then another dot, then he froze midst. I pressed closer to the glass, hardly breathing. The young man stood unnaturally still, one foot slightly raised, as if he'd been caught between steps. For nearly a minute, he didn't move at all. Then slowly, his head turned upward. His face, which had been tense with confusion, relaxed into a blank expression. The corners of his mouth began to lift, stretching outward until his lips formed the same horrible smile as all the others. "No," I whispered, pressing my hands against the glass. "No, no, no." I banged on the window, yelling, though I knew he couldn't hear me. "Run, get away from them." But it was too late. The young man now stood like all the others, perfectly still, face tilted upward. That unnatural smile fixed in place, another one taken by whatever this was. I stumbled back from the window, my breath coming in short gasps. I just watched it happen, watched someone change, become one of them. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If this was happening all over the city, Andrea. I scrambled for my phone, my fingers clumsy with panic. I didn't have her parents' number, but she'd given me access to her contacts months ago in case of emergency. Disqualified? I found their number under Mom and Dad and called with shaking hands. The phone rang and rang and rang. No answer, no voicemail. I tried 3 more times with the same result. Each unanswered ring twisted the knife of fear deeper. What if Andrea had made it to her parents, but was now standing somewhere in their neighborhood, smiling, that empty smile, staring at nothing? What if she was already lost to whatever was happening? My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, back against the wall, the phone still clutched in my hand. The thought of Andrea, vibrant, determined, Andrea becoming like those empty shells outside was too much to bear. The darkness beyond my windows seemed to grow deeper, more threatening. I sat there in my silent apartment, surrounded by the remnants of normal life that no longer existed, while outside those smiling figures waited for what I didn't know. But somehow, I was certain they would wait forever if necessary. Their eyes never closing, their smiles never fading, as constant and unchanging as the darkness that had swallowed the sun. I remained on the floor for what felt like hours, my back against the wall. Phone clutched uselessly in my hand. The weight of Andrea's absence pressed down on me like a physical thing. My thoughts spiraled between worry and fear, each scenario worse than the last. I forced myself to stand on shaky legs. Sitting here paralyzed by fear wouldn't help Andrea. I needed to do something, by what my phone called afternoon, though the darkness outside remained absolute. I had made up my mind. I couldn't stay in this apartment any longer, waiting for news that might never come. I had to find Andrea. The thought of venturing out there among those unblinking, smiling watchers, made my stomach clench. But the alternative, continuing to sit here, imagining Andrea in danger, was worse. I moved with newfound purpose, gathering supplies I might need. Flashlight, check. Fresh batteries, check. My phone now charged, but still useless for calls. I needed a weapon, too. something to defend myself if necessary. In my bedroom closet, behind winter coats and shoe boxes, I found my old baseball bat from college intramural games. I pulled it out, testing its weight in my hands. The familiar heft of it was reassuring in a world where nothing made sense anymore. I stuffed a bottle of water and a granola bar into my jacket pockets. No way to know how long I'd be out there. At the window, I checked the street again. The smiling figures remained in position, their faces still turned toward my building. More had joined them since morning, at least 20 now. Margaret still stood closest to the entrance, her nightgown fluttering slightly in the breeze. That fixed smile stretched across her face. The front door wasn't an option. I'd have to walk right past them. And after what I'd seen happen to that young man earlier, I wasn't taking any chances. The fire escape. That was my way out. I went to my bedroom window, unlocked it, and pushed up the sash. Cold air rushed in as I stuck my head out, looking down the metal scaffolding that zigzagged down the side of the building. No smiling figures on this side yet. I tucked the bat under my arm, gripped my flashlight, and climbed through the window. The metal grating felt cold and solid beneath my feet. I pulled the window mostly closed behind me, leaving it unlocked so I could get back in. The fire escape creaked softly as I made my way down, trying to be as quiet as possible. From this vantage point, I could see around the corner of the building to where some of the smiling figures stood. They didn't react to my presence. Their gaze remained fixed on the front of the building, as if they hadn't noticed me at all. When I reached the bottom, I jumped the last few feet to the ground, landing in the alley behind my building. I paused, listening. Nothing but distant sirens and the sound of my own breathing. I switched on my flashlight, keeping the beam pointed down to make myself less visible. Bat in my right hand, flashlight in my left. I moved toward the mouth of the alley. I peered around the corner. From here, I could see Margaret and several others still standing motionless, still staring up at my apartment. None of them had noticed I wasn't there anymore. Taking advantage of their fixed attention, I slipped out of the alley in the opposite direction, keeping close to the buildings, moving as quickly and quietly as I could. The streets were empty of normal activity. No cars moved along the road. No pedestrians hurried along with destinations in mind. Just darkness and silence, broken occasionally by distant sounds of chaos. A car alarm several blocks away. The wail of sirens that never seemed to come closer. Once the sound of breaking glass. I knew the route to Andrea's parents' house, 5 miles south. Under normal circumstances, it would take about an hour and a half to walk, but these weren't normal circumstances. The streets I knew so well had transformed into something alien and threatening. Abandoned cars sat at odd angles, some with doors left open. Store windows were smashed, their contents looted. A grocery store I passed had been completely ransacked, shelves bare, products scattered across the floor, visible through the broken front windows. I walked 3 blocks, staying alert, scanning constantly for those unnatural smiling figures. So far, none had appeared in my path. The only light came from my flashlight and the occasional still functioning streetlight. The darkness between these pools of illumination felt absolute and alive, as if it might reach out and grab me. I turned a corner onto a slightly wider street and stopped short. A man stood in the middle of the sidewalk about 30 feet ahead. He was facing away from me, completely motionless. I froze, praying he hadn't heard me. Maybe I could back up slowly, find another route. Before I could move, the man's head turned. Just his head. While his body remained facing away, it rotated further than a human neck should allow until he was looking directly at me over his shoulder. His face bore that same horrible smile I'd seen on all the others. Too wide, too fixed, too unnatural. I took a step back. The man's body jerked around to face me, the movement not fluid like normal human motion, but segmented as if his joints were mechanical. He took a step toward me. I raised my bat, Stay back, I warned, my voice sounding thin and ineffectual in the empty street. The man kept coming, that smile never wavering, his eyes never blinking. I moved to the right, trying to circle around him. He mirrored my movement perfectly, blocking my path. I said, "Stay back," I shouted, swinging the bat in a threatening arc in front of me. No reaction, not a flinch, not a pause. His pace remained steady, his smile fixed, his eyes unblinking. I feinted left, then dodged right. Somehow, he anticipated my move, shifting to block me again. "What do you want?" I yelled, fear making my voice crack. No answer, just that smile and those steady, jerky steps. He was close now, close enough that I could see the unnatural stillness of his eyes, the way his chest didn't seem to rise and fall with breath. I swung the bat. It was a perfect shot, aimed straight at his head. I felt the weight of the swing, felt the moment when it should have connected, but it didn't. Somehow I missed. The bat passed through the space where his head should have been, throwing me off balance with the unexpected lack of impact. I stumbled, caught myself, and looked up in confusion. The man stood exactly where he had been, unmarked, unaffected, as if my bat had passed right through him. Cold fear washed over me. This wasn't possible. I backed away, keeping the bat between us. The man followed, matching my pace exactly. When I took a step back, he took a step forward. When I moved faster, so did he. I turned and ran. His footsteps followed, keeping perfect time with mine. Not faster, not slower. Exactly the same rhythm, as if we were connected by some invisible tether. My lungs burned as I sprinted back the way I had come, the sound of his footsteps haunting me. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare slow down. I rounded the corner to my street and saw my building ahead. The front entrance was still surrounded by those smiling watchers. I veered toward the alley, toward the fire escape. I reached the bottom of the metal stairs and scrambled up, the bat clanging against the railings as I climbed. Only when I reached my floor did I dare to look down. The man stood at the base of the fire escape, his head tilted back, his eyes fixed on me, that smile still stretched across his face. He made no attempt to follow me up the stairs. He didn't need to. He had driven me back home. I climbed through my window and slammed it shut, locking it with trembling hands. I dropped the bat on the floor and stumbled to my living room window, needing to see, needing to know. Down below, the man had moved. He now stood with the others in front of my building, his face turned upward, toward my window. He had joined their silent vigil, but unlike the others, when I appeared at the window, his smile seemed to widen just a fraction, as if he recognized me, as if he knew me now. I backed away from the window, the reality of my situation crashing down on me. I couldn't leave. I couldn't find Andrea. I was trapped here in this apartment while those things waited below, and now one of them was hunting me. I sank onto my couch, still trembling from my encounter with the smiling man who chased me back home. My chest hurt from running, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My baseball bat lay on the floor where I dropped it, useless against whatever these things were. I closed the curtains tightly, not wanting to see that man's face turned up toward my window. The air in my apartment felt different somehow, colder, heavier, as if something fundamental had changed while I was out there. I grabbed my phone, desperately hoping for a signal for some way to call for help. The no-service icon stared back at me mockingly. I tried Andrea's number anyway. Nothing. For almost an hour, I sat in silence, listening to the distant sounds of a city in chaos. Occasional sirens, a car alarm that had been going for at least 20 minutes. Once what might have been gunshots several blocks away. I was just working up the courage to try the fire escape again. Maybe find a different route to Andrea's parents' house when I heard it. The distinct sound of my apartment door opening downstairs. My heart leaped in my chest. Andrea, had she made it back? Andrea, I called out. already moving toward the stairs. No answer. I paused at the top of the stairwell, suddenly uneasy. If it was Andrea, why hadn't she answered? Then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Heavy ones. Not Andrea's quick, light tread. Wrong. These footsteps were all wrong. I crouched low, peering down the stairwell into the kitchen below. Two figures stood there, completely still. A woman maybe 45 or 50 years old, in a wrinkled blouse and skirt, and a teenage boy in jeans and a hoodie. Both had their backs to my kitchen counter. Both had their faces turned upward, looking directly at the stairwell where I was hiding. Both wore those terrible stretched smiles. I pulled back instantly, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it. How had they gotten in? I had locked the door after Andrea left. I was certain of it. I always locked my door, even more so in this new world of perpetual night. The footsteps didn't resume. No sound came from the kitchen at all. Were they still standing there? Were they coming up the stairs? The silence was almost worse than any noise would have been. I backed away from the stairwell, moving as quietly as possible, toward my bedroom. The baseball bat. I needed the baseball bat. It hadn't worked against the man outside, but it was all I had. I retrieved it from the living room floor, gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. Back to my bedroom. Door closed, locked. A barrier between me and them, flimsy as it might be. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the bat. They were in my apartment, in my home, my last safe place. How had they gotten in? I fumbled for my phone again, desperate to call anyone, to reach any kind of help. I tried 911. Nothing. All emergency services. Nothing. Random numbers. Just hoping to reach another human being. Nothing. The signal was completely gone now. I pressed my ear against the bedroom door, straining to hear any sound from beyond. Nothing. Complete silence. Were they still in the kitchen? Had they left? Were they right outside my door? I dropped to my knees and peered through the keyhole, holding my breath. At first I saw nothing but the darkened hallway. Then a shadow moved across my limited field of vision. Something passed by the door, moving from left to right. Another shadow followed, this one slower. They were exploring my apartment, moving through my space, touching my things. I scrambled backward, away from the door, as if they might somehow reach through the keyhole and grab me. My dresser. I needed something to block the door. I set the bat down and pushed against the heavy wooden dresser. It scraped loudly across the floor. As I maneuvered it in front of the door, I winced at the noise, certain they could hear it, certain they now knew exactly where I was hiding. But what choice did I have? The dresser settled against the door with a final thud. I picked up the bat again and backed away until I hit the edge of my bed. I sank down onto it, bat across my knees, listening to the silence. The absolute terrible silence from beyond my door. I strained to hear any sound, footsteps, breathing, movement of any kind. Nothing, just silence. But I knew they were out there. I could feel them, like a pressure in the air, a weight against my skin. They were moving through my apartment. Those smiling, empty-eyed things that looked human but weren't. Not anymore. I thought of the man outside. How my bat had passed right through him. How he'd matched my pace exactly step for step, never gaining, never falling behind, as if we were connected somehow. What were they? What did they want? I clutched the bat tighter, staring at the barricaded door. The silence stretched on, unbearable, suffocating. My apartment had been my refuge, my safe place in this new dark world. Nowhere was safe. Not the streets, not my home, nowhere. If they could get in here, they could get in anywhere. Around midnight, the apartment fell into an eerie silence. I sat on the edge of my bed, baseball bat still clutched in my white-knuckled grip, straining to hear any movement from the other side of my barricaded door. The dresser looked solid against it, but I couldn't stop wondering if it would be enough. Then I heard it. A heavy scraping sound came from my living room. Something large and heavy being dragged across the hardwood floor. The sound was slow, deliberate, a prolonged scrap followed by silence, then another scrap. My mouth went dry. I stood up, bat raised, and moved closer to the door. The dragging continued. Scrap, pause, scrap. It had a rhythm to it, but not a mechanical one. The pauses between drags weren't consistent. Sometimes the sound lingered as if whatever was being moved had caught on something. I pressed my ear against the door, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. It had to be my furniture. They were just moving my couch or my coffee table. But why? What purpose could that possibly serve? The sound stopped abruptly. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. I backed away from the door and sat down on the edge of my bed again, bat across my knees. My watch told me it was 12:20. I stared at the dresser, barricading my door, and tried to think rationally. Those things, those smiling, empty-eyed things, were in my apartment, moving my furniture around. I should be trying to escape, not sitting here waiting for them to find a way in. But the only exit was through my bedroom window to the fire escape. And I knew from my earlier attempt that they were waiting down there, too. I was trapped for almost an hour. The apartment remained silent. I didn't move from my spot on the bed, didn't dare make a sound. The silence felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. Then the dragging started again. This time it was different, heavier, more labored. The sound moved from the living room into the kitchen directly below my bedroom. I could hear other noises now, too. The scrape of chairs on tile, the thud of something hitting the counter. They were rearranging my furniture, but the rhythm of the dragging bothered me. It wasn't consistent, like someone methodically moving things. It was jerky, irregular, almost organic. My mind flashed to horrible possibilities. What if they weren't dragging furniture? What if it was something else? Something. I shook my head, refusing to complete the thought, but I couldn't escape the image that formed anyway. Those smiling figures dragging something heavy and lifeless across my floor. Something that had once been a person. I clamped my hand over my mouth, trying to control my breathing. No, it was furniture. It had to be furniture. The dragging stopped again, but this time it was replaced by something worse. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the stairs leading up to my bedroom. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and paused. Then they continued moving down the hallway toward my bedroom door. One step pause, another step pause. Whatever was out there was taking their time, each footfall placed with deliberate precision. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I raised the bat, though I remembered how useless it had been against the man outside. My arms shook with the strain of holding it ready, but I couldn't lower it. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard it. The softest sound of the doorknob turning, attesting pressure. Finding it locked. The knob jiggled slightly more insistently, then pressure against the door itself. The dresser creaked as it was pushed from the other side, a slow, steady pressure that made the wood of both door and dresser groan in protest. I backed into the corner of my room, bat still raised. Would the dresser hold? It had to hold. The pressure increased. The dresser moved a fraction of an inch, its legs squeaking against the hardwood floor. But it was heavy, solid oak, filled with clothes. I had chosen it precisely because it was the heaviest piece of furniture in my bedroom. The groaning of wood continued, a terrible counterpoint to my ragged breathing. I could almost see the door beginning to bow inward under the pressure. Then, without warning, it stopped. The pressure against the door vanished. The doorknob released. The room fell silent again. I waited, bat still raised, muscles screaming from the tension of holding it ready to swing. Sweat dripped into my eyes, but I didn't dare lower the bat to wipe it away. Minutes passed. 5, 10. Nothing happened. Had they given up? Left? Or were they just waiting? I slowly lowered the bat, my arms trembling from exhaustion. I didn't dare sit on the bed. It was too far from the corner where I'd stationed myself. Instead, I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, the bat across my knees again. From this position, I could see both the door and the window. Neither offered escape. Both potentially hid horrors on the other side. I strained to hear any sound from beyond my door. My own breathing seemed thunderously loud in the silence. I tried to control it, taking shallow breaths through my mouth. What did they want? Why had they come into my apartment? Why try to get into my bedroom? I thought of Margaret Calloway standing in the street with her nightgown fluttering in the breeze. I thought of the man who had chased me back to my building, matching my pace exactly. I thought of the woman and teenage boy I'd glimpsed in my kitchen. None of them had tried to communicate. None had spoken a word. They just smiled those terrible smiles and stared with those unblinking eyes. And now they were in my home, dragging heavy things across my floor and trying to get into my bedroom. The silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional distant siren or car alarm from outside. Inside my apartment, nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. I checked my watch again. 1:30 in the morning. How long could I stay awake? How long before exhaustion overcame fear and I fell asleep, defenseless? I clutched the bat tighter and stared at the barricaded door, waiting for the next sound, the next attempt. Every muscle in my body remained tense, ready to react if the pressure against the door resumed. The darkness pressed against my window. The silence filled my ears. And somewhere beyond my bedroom door, those smiling things waited, their purpose unknown, their patience seemingly endless. The darkness outside my window hadn't changed, but my phone told me it was 6 o'clock in the morning. Dawn should have been breaking, but the world remained locked in perpetual night. I hadn't slept at all, still sitting against my bedroom wall, with the bat across my knees. My back ached, and my eyes burned with exhaustion. The apartment had been silent for hours. Not a footstep, not a scrape, not a single sound from beyond my barricaded door. But that didn't mean they were gone. Those smiling things could stand motionless for hours. I had seen that with my own eyes. I checked my phone again. The battery indicator glowed red at 9%. Soon it would die completely, and I'd lose my last connection to the normal world, useless as it had become, with no service. No way to call for help. No way to reach Andrea. Andrea. I closed my eyes, her face appearing in my mind. Where was she? Had she made it to her parents? Was she safe? Or had she become one of them? The thought made my chest hurt. I pushed myself up from the floor, my muscles protesting after hours in the same position. I needed to do something, anything, rather than just sit here waiting for whatever came next. My desk drawer held a few notebooks and pens from when I occasionally worked from home. I pulled out a spiral-bound notebook and a ballpoint pen. If I couldn't call for help, maybe I could at least leave a record of what had happened. Someone should know. Someone should understand what we'd experienced, even if I didn't understand it myself. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened the notebook to the first blank page. The pen hovered over the paper for a moment before I began to write. To whoever finds this, I paused, then crossed it out. Too dramatic. Too much like the beginning of a horror movie. This wasn't fiction. This was happening. I started again, simpler this time. My name is David Patterson. I live at 1422 Oakwood Avenue, apartment for B, Chicago. Today as I stopped, what day was it? The darkness had begun, when 2 days ago, 3. The days had blurred together in this endless night. I couldn't even remember what day of the week it had been, when the sun failed to rise. I don't know what day it is anymore. The sun hasn't risen in what feels like days. The world went dark and everything changed. The words flowed more easily after that. I wrote about waking up to darkness, about the confusion and panic that followed, about the news reports of worldwide darkness. about Andrea leaving to check on her parents and never returning. I described the figures in the street, Margaret Calloway in her nightgown, the others joining her one by one, all with those terrible fixed smiles. I wrote about my failed attempt to leave, the man who chased me back home, how my bat had passed right through him. Then I detailed how they'd somehow gotten into my apartment, the woman and teenage boy I'd seen in my kitchen, the sounds of furniture being dragged across the floor, the pressure against my bedroom door. As I wrote, I realized something I'd been avoiding thinking about. I couldn't stay in this room forever. I had no food, no water, nothing to sustain me. I was effectively trapped in a slowly closing box. Die quickly by facing whatever waited outside, or die slowly from dehydration. Some choice. I looked at the dresser pushed against the door. It had held when they tried to get in. But for how long would I be safe? And even if they never got in, what then? Wait until I was too weak from hunger and thirst to defend myself. I turned back to my notebook, writing faster now. I don't know what these things are. They look human, but they're not anymore. They don't blink. They don't speak. They just smile those terrible smiles and watch and wait. I don't know what happened to Andrea. I pray she's safe somewhere. I don't know what's happened to the world, why the sun won't rise, why people are changing. If anyone finds this, please try to understand. We didn't know what we were facing. We weren't prepared. I paused, pen hovering over the page. What else could I say? What wisdom could I possibly offer? If you're reading this and the world is still dark, be careful. Don't let them catch you watching them. Don't let them smile at you. And whatever you do, don't smile back. I closed the notebook and set it on my nightstand where it would be visible to anyone who entered the room. A small, pathetic legacy, but better than nothing. My phone showed 7% battery now. It wouldn't last much longer. I stood up, gripping the bat tightly. The dragging sounds from the night before played in my memory. What had they been moving? Furniture, or something worse? I couldn't shake the image of something heavy and lifeless being pulled across my floor. I hadn't heard those sounds resume, but that didn't mean anything. They could be standing right outside my door, still as statues waiting, but I couldn't stay here. I had to know if they were still in my apartment. I had to find food and water. I had to try to find Andrea. I moved to the dresser and set down the bat, bracing myself against the heavy piece of furniture. With a deep breath, I pushed, sliding it inch by inch away from the door. It made a terrible scraping sound against the hardwood floor, but I didn't care anymore. If they were out there, they already knew where I was. The dresser finally cleared the door. I picked up the bat again and stood facing it, my heart hammering in my chest. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. Nothing. Complete silence from the other side. I reached for the doorknob, my hand shaking so badly I almost couldn't grasp it. Then I froze. What if they were waiting just outside? What if opening this door meant joining them, becoming another unblinking, smiling figure standing in the darkness? But the alternative was staying here until I wasted away. No one was coming to help. No one even knew I was here. I had to try. My fingers closed around the doorknob. I slowly turned the lock, wincing at the loud click it made in the silence. I took a deep breath, tightened my grip on the bat, and prepared to open the door and face whatever waited on the other side. Whether I would walk out of this apartment alive, or join the ranks of those smiling figures in the street. My time hiding was over.